But I'm actually really excited to talk to you today, Aidan. So if you could tell us a little bit about ChainSafe, but I'd love to hear also just, how did you pick this space?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, to the FFCon team, and Amy for moderating this. I'm really excited to be here, to be talking, and to just, see where this conversation goes. So as Amy said, if there's anything you want to talk about in the chat, fire away. Maybe we won't answer everything, but we'll do our best to answer a few for sure. So yeah, just to kind of, I guess, take a step back a few years, I got into this space mostly through my friends. Got introduced to Bitcoin really early on by a friend when I was in high school. Wasn't really too interested by it. My dad has an economics background, and so I wasn't really that interested in taking kind of the financial world too seriously, as I just wanted to carve my own path. And then when kind of Ethereum started to take hold on the blockchain space at that time, I was really interested in decentralized tech in general, not necessarily just blockchain, but really just technologies that democratize access to what to me is the most important new human right, really, that a person needs to excel in today's world, which is access to information, right? We can call it the internet, the web, or whatever, but it's really just a right to access of information. And yeah, as Ethereum started to take hold, I really kind of got completely absorbed by the technology. Thankfully, in Toronto, we have some really great meetups that I was able to attend. I was able to take part in, and through that meet some of my co-founders, others I knew before. And with that, kind of ChainSafe was created to really be that objective technology development kind of firm that can be there to support decentralized protocols as they come through kind of the motions of going from an idea all the way up to production and maintenance. So at the moment, we're contributing alternative implementations, which are really just implementations of blockchains in the Filecoin, Polkadot, Ethereum, as well as just announced yesterday, the Mina ecosystems. And with that, we connect a lot of those blockchains with a project called ChainBridge, and really aim, as our mission states, to build the infrastructure for Web3.
Yeah, and it's really a series of toolkits. So you're basically kind of enabling, developers to be able to build on top of Ethereum or any of these other leveraging any of these other protocols. And so why did you choose that path versus maybe building a more end user facing platform?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely recently we have announced ChainSafe Files, which is live in beta, which is a user-facing consumer-grade application for storing files on top of IPFS and Filecoin. So definitely something, if any of you are interested in having a private end-to-end encrypted cloud storage solution, check out files.chainsafe.io, and soon we'll be announcing storage.chainsafe.io, which will be a more developer-focused site, which achieves similar things, but for developers. But yeah, I mean, going back to your question and the time frame in which we joined the space, we really wanted to build stuff for users, but that wasn't really an option. There was just such a lack of infrastructure and a lack of infrastructure being built in a technically objective way, right? So people exposing themselves across different ecosystems, leveraging these experiences and lessons from those different things and applying them across the board. And so it became pretty clear early on that there was no other way to achieve our end goal of bringing this to the masses beyond for a time period just focusing on developers and on empowering people, because not everyone's going to be able to utilize these technologies. People have jobs, they have families, right? Not everyone can just spend every waking hour on this technology and still has the ability to build something incredibly empowering and incredibly valuable to not just our ecosystem, but to the world. And so to be able to increase the impact anyone could have on the space, it was crucially important to focus on developers and really take a lot of those pains away from their day-to-days and leverage just wealth of knowledge across these different ecosystems and making that happen.
And so we look at, so all the things that are making headlines, of course, are sort of the instability of cryptocurrencies and the very speculative nature. And, the promise really is this kind of peer-to-peer economy. And I think it's actually really interesting that your father is an economist, and it would be great one day to actually have both of you in a conversation from the different perspectives. I know we may or may not want that, but for me, I look at the headlines and look at these behemoth financial institutions now trying to wrap their arms and sort of wrestle these cryptocurrencies to the ground and just sort of fold them into the existing economic construct. To me, that's the polar opposite of how we should be thinking about this digital currency. So I'd love your opinion. I mean, we talked a little bit about data, but even just in terms of what a peer-to-peer economy really looks like, and and how you're building for that, and maybe even some of the tools that you've already built for that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think something that not too many people really are thinking about. Right, we're talking about interoperability, for example, of financial instruments, but we're not really talking about interoperability of data, right? How do you value your reputation? How do you value your identity? And then how do we move those things from one place to another, right? I mean, one of the really cool use cases for this type of technology that's been discussed a lot is, for example, you're an Uber driver. You've driven for Uber for years, and Uber changes the fee structure. How do you move to another platform, right? You don't. You're trapped, because if you go to Lyft, you start from the beginning. And so creating not just tools for interoperability of financial instruments, but where people kind of talk about DeFi Lego and stuff like that. But also focusing on what it'll look like to bridge an actual data or decentralized kind of data enabled world. And that's definitely something that we're heavily focused on with ChainBridge, which is not just empowering people to move a token from one blockchain to another, or one blockchain to another, because we can have multiple connections through one relayer set, but to actually leverage our generic handler to be able to move arbitrary data. So, you can think about it as you have a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, on one chain interacting with, a decentralized exchange on another. And so, for example, we're on a platform right now that we're most likely interacting with servers of different kinds all over if not all over the world, at least different servers, and we don't really care to understand how that works under the hood. It just works. And I definitely do envision a world where the blockchain space, where a dApp is able to leverage many different blockchains, many different layer 2s, and allow us to just have a seamless experience like we have today.
So in thinking about something like a portable identity, and I work with a couple of companies that are looking at this in the game space, and it seems to me that gaming may be maybe the gateway drug is the wrong term to use, but kind of the gateway drug for consumers to start to really understand what this notion of portable identity, and then even moving into self-sovereign identity and being able to actually control and potentially even monetize their data. We whine a lot about Facebook and everyone taking our data, but we gave it to them. What is it going to take for us to kind of rein it back in? Again, you're building these toolkits, but are you seeing that developers are looking at solving part of this problem? And because it has to be an incredibly simple user interface for us to be able to really manage our data and manage our identity across the digital landscape. So where do you think that tipping point might be? And do you think games is one of the ways that we'll be able to do that?
I definitely believe that games are going to be a massive, massive step in the right direction. I mean, what we're seeing right now with NFTs is not for an average consumer, right? I mean, how many people in the chat right now have art in their portfolio, right? I mean, that's not something for an average person, right? That's for high net worth individuals. And it's not to say there aren't any high net worth individuals in the chat, but it's just, it's just almost funny, how people are talking about these things as if they're meant to be democratized, right? It's not. It's for rich people. But yeah, I do believe that gaming is going to be a massive, massive step into making NFTs for the masses and bringing it to regular people, where all of a sudden, your in-game assets are all either tokenized on one chain or another, and you're able to leverage that to actually have ownership of these things. So, I grew up playing a lot of MMOs, and yeah, like trading was a massive part of it. And so to have that be coordinated through a system that doesn't require me to then go and buy and sell stuff on an outside market, and allows me to do it all in game, and build more games that are connected to one another. I think it's definitely going to be what brings NFTs to regular people in the quickest amount of time. And I'm definitely biased. We're soon going to be releasing something for that, so I'm definitely biased.
Great.
In how I feel about games and gaming in general and NFTs. But I do believe that's the step in the direction of regular people having a concept of what blockchain technology can do for them.
And I think, the NFTs, I think, are really scratching the surface of how we rethink value. And I'd love to get your where this can go in terms of, this true peer-to-peer economy means that, one item to me might have a different value, and I might be willing to pay more. You might be willing to sell it to me for one value, and there may be multiple data points, right, that you might be able to gather to decide what a value to one person might be versus another. But where do you see it going without flaming out into this kind of faddist, which is what's been happening? And it happened. We saw it happen with Bitcoin and people kind of looking at cryptocurrencies as the a dangerous financial Wild West, and then now NFTs gaining popularity. How do we take the kind of media spotlight away from them and really ground them with some value and build an interesting construct for people to actually buy and sell? And as Dan pointed out, it's not necessarily art, but these objects of desire or services or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was pretty clear in my answer that I was not saying that NFTs are just art. But yeah, I definitely agree that there's a need to ground things in actual use across real people, and that requires people imagining what a world can look like where ownership can be something that is very transparent, right? I mean, what we also have seen is real world assets as NFTs allow for the minting of DAI through MakerDAO, and so more and more we are going to see that there's going to be much more clear understanding of more than just digital representations of digital things, but also digital representations of real things. And we're definitely seeing that, and these are things that have been worked on for many years. and only are just getting the spotlight or kind of some spotlight. However, it's not going to be easy because it doesn't necessarily, make the headlines, because it's just a little bit too real. And so I think what we're going to see is that people need to start applying these things to regular applications that already exist, and not needing to just do something in a completely new way, which then will lead us to this completely new peer-to-peer economy where, it's pretty clear we're all working towards that. I mean, looking at even things like Amazon, looking at things, like Alibaba, I mean, how they've basically connected people, and it's not going to be very hard to take them out of the mix, once we do have, more of this technology figured out. It's not going to happen overnight, but most of the internet services that make up kind of the mass of at least what we see in the news from a technological perspective are just people who connect other people. And there's no reason why that can't be done through a trustless mechanism, where people are empowered to get more of that ownership and not be just taken advantage of.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that is the Brave New World dream, and this kind of democratization of data and information and currency and really what the opportunity here is. But of course, this is going to require either the toppling or vast restructuring of these behemoth companies, right? And they're not going to go down easily. How do you see that kind of reconciling between now and where we really hope to go? And I also have this positive vision, and I believe it will happen. But there are going to be some bumps along the road, and how should we be planning for that? How should we think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and one that is hard to answer in a short, in such a short kind of conversation. But I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There's definitely going to be a lot more awareness by actors that this is something that doesn't necessarily play nice with current systems, but at the same time does allow for them to realize a lot more, in terms of just services offering. And I see it as kind of, the Linux of the financial system, what's being built, and of the data economy, right? I mean, Microsoft didn't go anywhere. It still exists. And if anything, they now have started to incorporate more and more open source, after being very much against open source. And so I definitely think that we're going to see something very similar, where you can see as what's going on as basically the open sourcing of the financial and data economy, which is going to be a great thing, but it's also not going to replace. I'm definitely not someone who believes that we have to replace, rather create a parallel kind of system that allows for people who want access to the system to be a part of it, but doesn't, I'm not looking to get rid of the pensions of so many hardworking Canadians. That's not my goal. I think a lot of people want there to be this very adversarial relationship where, screw the traditional system. But at the end of the day, we definitely want to make sure that the traditional system isn't actually hurt, because a lot of people's livelihoods are dependent on that outside of just the big bankers. And so creating a world that they can transition towards with products and services that are on par, I mean, in my opinion, going to be a lot better, is definitely step one.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think there's some parallels with the concern over things like automation, taking people's roles. And I think it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, it's actually going to create just another layer of jobs, right? Either managing the automation or freeing you up to do other things, more kind of creative things. And I think there's some parallels with, how we can move into this realm again of open data and the peer-to-peer economy. And so, I want to go back to NFTs for a bit. I think again we've really just sort of scratched the surface of where that can go. I actually went to an art opening where art pieces were all on auction, but they were all created by an AI. And to me, I think where it starts to get really exciting is these blending of these technologies, right? So you have these digital art assets that are consistently shifting. So each NFT might be a particular point in time of the same artwork, but it might have evolved then 6 months. And then someone else there might be an NFT around that particular point in time. And I just thought that was a really interesting construct that I had never thought of. And are you seeing anything else like that really sort of, that maybe blends technologies, or is just another interesting way to look at, where NFTs might go?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. But I really do think that the intersection of the real world and the digital world is where we're going to see NFTs really take flight. The second, you can have a representation of the things that you own, that you would seek credit for, or you would seek some kind of service around, and you can bring that into a decentralized kind of narrative, whether it be insurance or like I said, credit. That's going to be, I think, where we really see things like NFTs, whether they are NFTs or just, a different standard. But yeah, the notionally NFTs, things that are unique. I think that's where we're going to see an incredible explosion in the use, not just of NFTs, but also of DeFi as well. The second that we can start doing a lot of the things that are being done today in the real world, I think that's going to be so exciting to see, and it's something that I'm personally, waiting for the day in which we can do these more traditional things, because that's just, I think what a lot of us are waiting for.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you pointed out that the opportunity isn't an either or, but it really is this kind of parallel construct. And how do we ensure that it really kind of maintains the vision, right, for this Web 3.0, where really data is accessible to everyone, changing your sort of financial strata is a possibility, and really sort of this level set open source realm. How long is that going? There's no real answer, but are we really going to be able to get there, knowing that there will be some resistance from the status quo? And even though I think we conceptually understand that this again acts in parallel and provides just more choice for people, I think there's a big fear factor, as there always is, from kind of the status quo in that realm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're getting to a point now where this technology is unstoppable, regardless of the price of anything. I mean, it's not going anywhere. There's, people who are going to maintain this technology and going to ensure that this is a core part of the web infrastructure for the future of the internet. So I think there are much more pressing issues surrounding the longevity of humanity and of fixing social issues that will impact whether or not Ethereum is here in 100 years than Ethereum being captured by large institutions, or something like Ethereum being captured by large institutions. So I think it's really important that we focus on the things that matter to us, which is technology, and make very clear that we're not changing people's lives explicitly. We're not creating social impact beyond creating open source technology that then people can use to create social impact, right? And it's really important to understand the place in which we all are in this kind of movement towards democratizing information data in the world, which is, yeah, it's very important to realizing what the world will look like in the future and what my mission is. And going back to the first half of your question, how do we ensure that basically the culture and ethos is maintained? I mean, at the end of the day, that's going to be up to all of us. And anything has the ability to be captured, but with the beauty of open source is that we are able to ensure that capture isn't always going to be maintainable, and that we can always move and remove negative actors, and it's not something that we have to be, you know, necessarily afraid of. That is one of the major kind of governance actions that can be taken, is forking the network, which we've seen countless times with countless networks over technical decisions that are, or I should say, technical decisions or fake technical decisions that are really just political ones.
Right.
And so we've seen that, right? We've seen that time and time again. And yeah, things will still proliferate, and if it needs to happen more, it'll happen again. So yeah, it's interesting, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I do feel like your comment, and you know, Lynn had an interesting question, which I don't know if we have a ton of time to answer. You know, just around the energy piece. I think, I mean, my personal opinion is that like all of the technology pieces get solved, but in the interim, you know, how do we address the environmental impact of you know, blockchain and the amount of energy consumption?
Yeah, I always find this question to be incredibly hilarious in terms of the energy consumption of blockchain, and the reason I say that is because, you know, because you know exactly how much energy is being consumed by blockchain technology, because it is transparent with it, then somehow that is worse than other things that are completely, you know, opaque in terms of how much energy they consume. You know, the world of AI, for example, you know, there's so much energy being consumed there. So yeah, I find this question to be pretty funny in that, yes, because we are transparent, it puts a target on our back from kind of these preposterous claims that somehow blockchain is going to be going to be the reason for climate change, just so people don't have to change their lives, don't have to go vegan, don't have to bike around the city, and they can just read the news and say, yeah, it's blockchain technology that's warming the world. So it's kind of, I find it funny, and yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I was excited about Ethereum is the move to proof of stake, is the move to less computationally heavy, energy inefficient processes that, you know, ensure consensus of these networks. And yeah, as someone just mentioned right now, exactly, the energy consumption of the traditional financial industry combined, it's, how much is that? I mean, there are studies on these things, but it's not very transparent, so there's no necessary target on their back. So I always find these to be pretty interesting things, in that the transparency leads to demonization.
Yeah, so I Lynn, I don't think this was meant to be insulting to you in any way. I you know, I understand both sides of the concern, and I think that where we want to get to, and to Aidan's point, in general, how we move forward is up to us. And I like to take a shot at apps like Nextdoor, not because their Nextdoor is a bad idea, but you look at what people are focused on, you know, and you know, telling tales about what other people are doing wrong, and you know, how they're insulted by, you know, getting the, you know, cut off in line at a coffee shop, instead of really thinking about what is the opportunity here, and learning about technology and understanding what the for technology. And to me, that's kind of the bigger picture view. And I hope that we're able to inspire people to do just that. And I think you've done a good job of that today, Aidan. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, just to say that wasn't meant to call out anyone in particular. It's just in general, like you're saying, there are things we can actively do in our lives to lead to a better future, that by focusing on things that really are distractions, we're taking away from our ability to affect change in the world. And I really do believe that there's such an opportunity for anyone who's interested in this technology to be an actual change maker in the world and how we conduct ourselves on the web. And so take this opportunity and make this a part of your future roadmap and how you start to make blockchain a more tangible part of this future that we're all trying to build, because it is there and you haven't missed anything. These hype cycles will come and go, but your ability to build something that has a meaningful impact will be here to stay. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me here, for being able to share these things. And yeah, I'd love to, if anyone wants to follow up or talk about anything. And thank you, Amy, for moderating this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really, really enjoyed hearing your insights. I'm sure everyone here did. And feel free to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.